How the hell am I going to explain a manhunt for a duck? It's a duck hunt? Welcome to Hey You Guys podcast. I'm Rob, this is Liam. A little while back, I chose Super Mario Brothers, a film where I felt I needed to make a public apology for covering. This week, we watched 1986's Howard the Duck, a film I make no apology for covering. Executive produced by George Lucas and directed by William Hyuk, a man that, for reasons that escape me, never directed a film after this. Starring Leah Thompson, Jeffrey Jones, who I'm sure in our Beetlejuice episode we mentioned is allegedly a very bad man. Oh, and also randomly Tim Robbins, which one must wonder, does he include this as well as Shawshank as the highlights of his career? What you may not know is that Howard the Duck is a Marvel comic. Not just that, but randomly, this appears to be the very first theatrically released Marvel comic adaptation. That's right, 12 years before Blade and 14 years before X-Men, there was Howard the Duck. If we learn nothing else from this film, we should take solace in the fact that I am sure this is where the phrase, fuck a duck, originated from. Morning, mate.
No jokes. Yeah, all good. And bizarrely, I actually agree with you. I mean, this is our 70th podcast, and quite amazingly, out of 70 rewatches, I think I've enjoyed 68 of them. So the two I didn't enjoy were the aforementioned Super Mario Brothers. Now that was just a bad movie, and it didn't even get into the so bad it's good. It was so bad it was bad. I really hated rewatching that film. The other one was Flight of the Navigator, which I didn't hate, but I felt indifferent towards, complete indifference, the same as yourself. So it made for a pretty tricky conversation, if anything. And usually I prefer to watch a bad film than a film I'm indifferent about. At least it's elicited a reaction. Now this film has certainly elicited reaction out of me. I enjoyed rewatching it, but make no mistake, that doesn't mean this film is good, because it's not. It's a bad film, but it's an interestingly bad film.
It is very bad, but it's also done randomly very well. I mean, look at the way Howard the Duck moves. Look at the way they put so much effort into that suit and everything like that. And oh my God, how much they probably put into duck boobs.
Well, that's the thing. I was watching the uncut version, and it makes for an even stranger experience, because this movie, you can really split it down the middle. The first half has got what we always think of as being the weird stuff, weird sex stuff, obviously the famous scene with Leah Thompson and Howard in the bed and stuff like that. But I think it really turns at the lab. Like at the lab, they go to the lab, and this film takes a hard left and becomes a completely different film. And I don't know, I actually quite enjoyed the first half of the film. So I forgot what my initial point was then. I kind of started going off on a tangent, or more importantly, what your point was in the first place. But it's one of those big boobs, yes. Like when this film's open, if you're watching the uncut version, like it's front-loaded, no pun intended there. You see actual duck boobs with nipples. It's bizarre. There's a famous scene which was cut from the movie to make it PG initially, which is in the uncut version, where Leah Thompson goes to his wallet and it's got a tiny little condom in it. The most disturbing part of that, of course, is that it's an unwrapped condom.
It was open. I had that written down. I said, how gross how gross is it that she's pulling out an unwrapped condom? Like he's used it, washed it, folded it up, and put it back in.
Yeah, that's one of the more concerning things you could ever come across, like an unused open, like he feels the need to keep it in his wallet. So yes, very strange. But like I said, the first half of this movie is kind of the movie that you suspect would be made today. It doesn't stick the landing at any point. It's tonally, even in the first half, all over the place. But if they were going to make Howard the Duck today, which isn't unthinkable, he's been in a bunch of movies at this point. He's made a bunch of cameos in Guardians of the Galaxy, Guardians 2. He was in Endgame. He's had his own... he was certainly prevalent in What If. But if they were going to make a Howard the Duck now, it would be based on the first half of this movie, which is very much character-driven. There's hardly any action. And yes, there's some weird sex stuff, and the writing isn't quite there to kind of pull off what they're going for. But I feel like the first half is the movie that George Lucas kind of envisioned. I know he had we'll get to what his initial vision was, but tonally, I can imagine what he wanted and what is probably closer to what they might deliver today. The second half, once they go to the lab, was what the studio wanted, clearly. Was like, nobody really, and you got to remember, this is 1986. they really didn't know what a comic book movie should look like. And it's like, well, there's got to be flying cars, there's got to be explosions, there's got to be demons, and there's got to be special effects. And it all happens after the lab. Before the lab, there's hardly any action in this film. It's completely character-driven.
All the action set pieces are set after the lab, and you get action set piece after action set piece. It goes from the lab exploding to the fight in the diner to the highway car chase to the fight in the lab. It's just like, obviously you've got the nuclear power station in between all that as well. But did you find it strange, right at the beginning, the introduction of Howard, why the choice that they made to have Howard in shadow, as if the big reveal is, look, he's a duck? Because not only is the title Howard the Duck, but everything else, you've got the posters that show the duck, you've got Play Duck, he's turned the TV on, there's ducks dancing. Why did they feel the need to have Howard in shadow right up until he sat in his chair, smoking a cigar, sounding like a 50-year-old man throughout the film, right? And the dude is meant to be 27.
Yeah, that is weird. Everything about that is quite. I guess at that point, the big reveal, and you got to remember, again, this is 1986, is that, and regardless of what you might think about the rest of the film, the two things that stand out as being impressive on an objective level are, I think, the special effects for the most part for 1986, and the soundtrack, which is both the soundtrack and the score, which are both fantastic.
I'm not going to sing it.
We'll get there. We'll get there. I'll be amazed if one of us doesn't sing that amazing song at the end of the film. But I guess the reveal was like, well, look what we've done. Like, like that is a selling point for the film, was how, like, and you mentioned at the top, like how good the suit looks. And they went back and forth on this a lot. I mean, initially they were going to do CG, because you remember this is like Lucasfilm at the, peak of their powers. But they realized they couldn't stick the landing. Sorry, I keep stick the landing. I'm worse than this film. It's going to be a bunch of duck puns.
Especially when you see Dark Overlord at the end as CG. If you had that throughout the whole film, it'd look wrong. So I think they went the right thing with animatronics.
100%. Well, they actually went with full animatronics at one point, but eventually decided that, again, they couldn't get the kind of level of movement they wanted. So they went with a dude in the suit.
Well, they went with dudes in a suit.
Yes, dudes in a suit. I do apologize.
There was a lot of them, wasn't there? There was about 5 or 6 of them.
I think the main guy was, because they were like, in terms of if you look like who played Howard the Duck, like Ed Gale gets the top billing in terms of he was acting as Howard the Duck, and then it was Tim Rose who voices Admiral Akbar of It's a Trap fame. He was doing the voice for the most part. So I think maybe other guys were involved, but if you look at the billings, Ed Gale, who's famous, he's been in Spaceballs, Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. He was in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? He had a small role in that. He was kind of the key I'm Howard guy kind of thing.
Yeah, but you still get Tim Rose, Steve Sleep, Peter Baird, Mary Wells, Lisa Sturz, and Jordan Prentice. There's and like Jordan Prentice, the only film I know him from as well, aside from the American Pie spin-offs, apparently, he was actually in Bruges. He was the one in Bruges who gets who. I
don't want to say assaulted, but it's in the acting scene. He's playing an actor, isn't he?
Who's Ray Fiennes? It was Ray Fiennes, wasn't it? Who thinks he's shot a little kid, so he shoots himself.
Yeah. Oh, what a film that is!
It's great. Movie. It is great. Yeah. Sorry, so many people played Howard the Duck. Was my point? Sorry.
No. And as you said, like the effects, like again, those elements of the film hold up, but I'm not sure if anything else does. Basically, I mean,
the writing is a bit ropey. The acting is rope. Was this Tim Robbins' first film? Because he made an acting choice that I'm not sure worked.
Well, no, and it's the same with both him and Jeffrey Jones. And we won't go into all Jeffrey Jones the bad guy. We'll judge him on the basis of this film. And I do like, as an actor...
I've got through. He's a bad man. If you want to know why
he's a bad man, it's fine. Yeah. But we're judging him on his acting credibility. And based on that, like, I really like Jeffrey Jones. As an actor, he plays a big role in a lot of the films I grew up with. And in this, I actually think... for the second half of the movie we're talking about here, he gets the tone probably about right, maybe, but he and Tim Robbins are swinging for the fences. They've just heard comic book movie, and they're like, we're going all in. Like, Tim Robbins is going two-footed on every single scene.
Tim Robbins is shouting his lines every chance he gets. Also, he did Top Gun before this.
Oh, yeah, of course he did, didn't he? Yeah, it's a small role, admittedly, but a very different role. But, I mean, again, though, I'm not sure how people were supposed to act, because he actually fits in quite well with the second half of the movie. In the first half of the movie, again, everyone's playing it relatively low-key, considering it's a movie about an anthropomorphic duck and his weird relationship with Leah Thompson's character, Beverly. And then out of the blue, Tim Robbins shows up and they're like, oh, well, it's a comic book movie and you're wearing a lab coat. So he's like, well, I'm going to go insane. The only thing he's really missing is the hair, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, he was doing full Doc Brown, wasn't he?
He was. I mean, yeah, but Doc Brown turned up to 11. Which, again, it's just another one of the examples with this movie where you have this just total clash of tones all the way through it. And as I said, I actually think the first half, despite a complete lack of action, as a character piece, I think it actually is quite an interesting. I was watching the film and I was like, it's not quite working, but it's almost there, and I'm enjoying it. Yeah. Like, I enjoyed the relationship. It's weird, the relationship between Howard and Beverly, but I still enjoyed it. And it's only when I think the film actually completely goes off the rails in the second half. I think the big issue with this film isn't, funny enough, the stuff people talk about, the weird sex stuff. I think that's, again, closer to what we get now. The issue is the second half, where the studios obviously got overly involved, or they've panicked and thought, we've got to have all this action. Because at that point, all the character goes out the window, all the motivations. Like, at that point, I even think there might be a scene missing. They go to the lab, and then all of a sudden, Howard's a fugitive for reasons we don't know. The cops, despite the fact that there's a demon on the loose, all the cops are interested in is capturing Howard. It's never made clear why.
Can I go to that then? Sorry.
Yeah, go for it.
So you said all the cops are interested in is going to catch Howard after the second half of the film. Where are the cops? Where's the government? Anything like that in the first half of the film when, as you said, there's an anthropomorphic duck walking around Cleveland, as he calls it.
Yeah.
Like, he's literally on the side of the street. He's on a bus. People are letting him just walk, and they don't want to go near him. But nobody's going, there's a two-legged duck just walking on. Where's the people just capturing him or anything like that?
I'd love to use that as example. A two-legged duck. I was like, ducks do have two legs, in fairness.
Yeah, actually, yeah. Okay, there's
an upright, sentient, well, I guess ducks are sentient. I'm doing it even worse now. An intelligent, humanoid duck.
Humanoid. There's a humanoid duck walking around, right? Why is nobody running tests on it? Even to the point where everyone's happy. Well, a person's happy to hire him at a really seedy massage parlor.
It's a super seedy massage parlor, but it is a problem with the start of the film. Like, there are completely inconsistent reactions to Howard. Like, Howard shows up. The gang member, apparently, if you're in a gang in the 80s, nothing phases you at all. Like, they don't give a shit. Other people scream and shout. Other people just look completely different. Fair, some people give them a job, which is, like you say,
be fair, insane. This gang did model their look after Culture Club. So
they did. It was like a cross between Culture Club and the Bad music video by Michael Jackson. It kind of had that vibe to it. Yeah. But what they should have done, and it was something that George Lucas initially wanted to do, was the Paddington approach. Like, if you've seen Paddington, one of the genius choices they make in that film is just the fact that everyone accepts that Paddington exists in the world. Yeah. Like, it's not a weird thing that there's a talking bear, and you just get over it immediately. And it scraps so much unnecessary, narrative exposition is out the window. Because then, a bear just exists in this universe, a talking bear, and everyone's just like, well, that's a thing. It's fine. And he wanted to do that because he wanted to make, which again, more in line with the comics, he wanted to make Howard the Duck a private eye in Hawaii in a world where everyone just accepts that there's a talking duck. Yeah. So you don't need to explain it. Instead, they make him an advertising copywriter for reasons I don't know. His only power is that he knows what duck foo, and it's, again, very inconsistent, his use of it. Quack foo. I do apologize. But yeah, it's, this film would have benefited so much if they just kind of scrapped that whole element about, there's a walking duck. Because, as you say, a walking duck. God, we're as bad as each other now.
On Ducks two legs.
On two fucking legs. But if they had just scrapped that element and just everyone accepts the fact that there's a world where a duck exists, instead they have all that Doctor Strange stuff at the start, which, again, talk about inconsistencies. In the introduction to this film, it's almost, again, recognizable as modern Marvel, where they're almost hinting towards like alternate universes. And that makes sense. Duck World makes sense in its own unique way, in a multiverse where it's basically a mirror of our world, only everyone's a fucking duck.
I loved how, as well, when he's pulled out at the end into space, which he doesn't suffocate for, mind. He's pulled into space.
Of course. Yeah.
The world is shaped like an egg. Obviously. I mean, why not?
Of course it is. Of course it is.
It's as well. I mean, I know you had a really good point, and you
I really did
so well. And now I've completely changed the subject because we already mentioned Super Mario Brothers. Spike is in this film as well, isn't he?
Oh my goodness! Of course he is. He is. Do you know the bizarre thing? I looked at him and went, I know him, and it just didn't click. It was Super Mario Brothers. It was like my brain didn't want to accept it.
We're going to do some weird Richard Edson trilogy as well, because at some point we're going to do Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and he was the guy that steals the car.
Steals the car, yeah. The unofficial trilogy. Jesus, it has to be an unofficial trilogy because there's no official trilogy. I can tell you that much. But yeah, like, it doesn't. Later on in the film, they shift the focus to it's just a different planet, and that doesn't make any sense. Like, why would there be Indiana Jones but ducks? Why would there be all these kind of like everything is recognizable as being Earth but with a duck pun, which again makes no sense. We don't call it human Earth rather than duck world. But again, I was willing to go on that journey if it was an alternate universe, the same with the duck-shaped planet. But when it's just another planet in our own universe, it makes no fucking sense whatsoever.
We accidentally pointed at your planet. Like, oh, no, we just slipped. Sorry.
Yeah, and we accidentally brought demons through.
We managed to go through an apartment block, through several rooms, past a woman having a bath with her tits hanging out, to catch your armchair. Like,
yeah, it's so odd. And as you say, like that, when you see the duck, like it's front loaded. Again, I keep using that as like this. I keep using accidental puns, and I blame this movie because it's just a mountain of puns. But there's the boob thing, and then like you said, you mentioned the sauna sequence. That sequence is insane.
Yeah.
What's up with the weird, sexy mud bath? Like there was no reason for that to be there.
People who are getting it on so much, they don't care that there is now a duck in there.
Yeah, like an anthropomorphic duck walking into the room is not putting you off your game. No one's that into sex.
We got to do it. You mentioned it now, getting into your game. How bad is Marty McFly's mum's love life, right? That she's happy to just hook up after she's seen the used condom as well. She's happy to go for it.
Well, the thing is, though, I never know because I hadn't seen this film. I've seen this film once years ago, so I kind of remember vaguely the sex scene is jumping out at me. But I didn't notice, like at the end, she actually says, "Oh, I'm just kidding." Like, so they don't actually have sex. She kisses him, but she says, "Oh, I'm just kidding. We're not having sex. I'm just winding you up." It's like a poster moment for
Although,
like the Me Too
the silhouette
moment.
then does give. I do think if Tim Robbins randomly hadn't invaded her space with two other random dudes, he might have gone for it.
Well, say she was indeed just messing around. It was the worst dick tease of all time. Like, come on. Right, if you remove the duck element, if for a second you can remove the duck element, she invites you back up into her house and she gets into bed looking like that, wearing that. I mean, Jesus Christ. I mean, I don't buy it for a second she was joking. I just don't buy it. Like, she gets into bed wearing basically nothing. She looks like Leah Thomas in 1986, so she's smoking hot. And she's all like rubbing his chest, rubbing his hair. There's the weird boner joke about like the hair thing sticking up and stuff like that. And then just as he thinks, oh, it's action time, she's like, oh no, I'm just kidding. What the fuck? You can't do that. That's the worst.
Especially to a guy, right, whose first act when he lands on another planet is to sexually assault a woman. Like he lands there, she's getting it on with her boyfriend or some dude she's met from a club. First thing he does is lift her skirt up just to have a go. You know, I mean, that's sexual
assault. He's a filthy little bastard.
Yeah,
like you've seen what it's like in Cleveland. Like one of the opening sequences, like Leah Thomas nearly gets sexually abused by two guys until obviously he comes to help her. It's a very rapey film in many respects, and again, speaks to the inconsistent tone. But it's a bizarre sequence. That's you
mentioned that gang, right? Who grab him. And they give him to the dude and said, we found your date. And they push him into Leah Thompson's club. Why did they dress that dude up like Egon Spengler?
I have no idea. I don't know why anyone is dressed like anyone in this film.
It's completely like Egon.
Yeah, he really is. I mean, this movie is peak 80s in many respects. But some of the dress code, and even Leah Thompson's character in particular. I mean, I think she wanted to go for because obviously she's in a band, she's in the Cherry Bombs. And she said she wanted to go for a cross between Madonna and Cyndi Lauper. And in fairness, she actually nails that look. Yeah. Like, I buy her as like the lead of a band. But it's like we got to mention the whole Leah Thompson thing. Is it Thompson? Leah Thompson.
Yes. Yeah.
Thompson. I think I was saying Thomas. I do apologize. It's like she's this should have been her breakout role. This is coming hot off the heels of Back to the Future. But instead, she became the woman who did kind of weird sex stuff in kind of mainstream movies. Like, her two most famous roles are arguably this and Back to the Future. In one of the movies, she's trying to fuck her son. And in the other movie, she's trying to fuck an anthropomorphic alien duck. Like, that is absolutely insane. Like, this woman really could have been, the next big thing in Hollywood. Instead, she just ends up with this weird kind of place in Hollywood history, which is a shame because I think she's really good. And one of the reasons this works so well is that, again, sex stuff aside, is her relationship with Howard, which does get abandoned. She gets just turned into a damsel in distress in the second half. Yeah. But in the first half, I totally buy into their relationship. And it's the reason that for 45 minutes or so, this movie almost works. Almost.
It's funny, right? Because you're saying about she was known for the weird type of sex stuff. She went from this to Some Kind of Wonderful, where she hooks up with Eric Stoltz, but then she did a film then called Casual Sex, which is just all about casual sex.
I'm not sure if you can call sex with your son or sex with an anthropomorphic alien duck as being casual. I would say it's quite intense.
Just say two-legged duck. It's fine.
Yeah, maybe if she was in a show called Criminal Sex. Although I suspect, while the Back to the Future thing, you might get away with the whole timey-wimey elements of it. I suspect that there's probably not a law in place for having sex with alien ducks. So she might get away with it.
What happens if she gets pregnant? Does she lay in an egg, or is
Yeah, that could be pretty disturbing, couldn't it? But luckily, like we said, all these questions and all of that relationship that's built up is quickly just kind of completely cast aside.
I will say, in my mind, I did think that she went all the way with him. It was only when I watched it this time, I was like, they didn't actually have sex. I have been going on and on and on about the fact that she fucked the duck. But
yeah, I think in a lot of the scenes, and I think it's quite sneaky. If you watch it, I don't know, like I just watched up until the point where she kisses Howard and you just assume, because it's a silhouette that they're going to have sex. And it's like either I didn't see that bit of the scene where she says, I'm just kidding, or I didn't want to see it because I was just kind of, I was so into the idea that Leah Thompson had sex with Howard the Duck in a mainstream movie. So yeah, it was the first time I've ever noticed the fact that she's just like, I'm just kidding. Yeah. And the fact that they don't actually have sex because Timmins and everyone else comes in. There is the question, much like the whole baseball question from A League of Their Own, did she purposefully drop the ball at the end of the movie? The question is, if Tim Robbins hadn't come in, would she have not had sex with Howard? Would she have been like, I was just kidding, I'll give you a kiss, we'll go to sleep? Or if they hadn't burst into the door, like it would have got that. I'm of the mindset that it was going to happen.
I'm kind of thinking she wanted to see what alien duck sex was like.
Oh my God, this film is, I can't believe we're having this conversation. It's so bananas. But yeah, after that point, they go to the lab. It was almost as if they decided, we've got John Barry, who's doing the score, and John Barry is famous for doing, maybe more so than anything else, a lot of James Bond scores. Yeah. And you'll notice when they go to the lab in particular, it feels like a set from a Roger Moore movie. It really does. With a giant telescope, there's laser beams, the full works. And the score at that point goes full on James Bond. And the movie at that point just abandons all elements of plot, or at least common sense. Maybe it goes into full plot, actually probably arguably goes into full plot overdrive, but just abandons character. Because, Jeffrey Jones at this point had been a kind of mild-mannered doctor. His character after this, it's bananas. I mean, he goes through all the 80s kind of monster tropes. And it always looks cool. One of the things I think that stands out is the stuff with Jeffrey Jones from a visual perspective looks amazing. At the start, it looks like something out of Ghostbusters. Yeah. Then all of a sudden, he goes full John Carpenter's The Thing with like the fucking tentacle and all that jazz. And by the end, he looks like Lo Pan from Big Trouble in Little China.
You said Lo Pan, which I agree with. I also thought he looked a bit like Dr. Robotnik.
Yeah, he absolutely does.
Dr. Robotnik in a lab coat. But I bet his fucking throat hurted. Hurted a lot. Was in pain after he was doing his Dark Overlord impression and all that jazz. Yeah. Oh my God.
I hope he didn't have to do too many takes because, again, you talk about swinging for the fences. He's going for it. A bit more acceptable from him because you have to remember he is playing a demon overlord or whatever it is, which is comic accurate, as is because one of the big questions I had for this film was, why the fuck is he going to Cleveland? Is this a budget thing? I was like, this is an expensive movie for 1986. It cost like $37 million to produce. But no, the Cleveland thing is from the comics. And so is the overlord thing and all that jazz. But again, I just don't think it works in the film. But Jeffrey Jones, fair play, his game, he goes for it, but his voice must have been absolutely goosed. I mean, the best preparation he could have done for this role is just by smoking 20 a day, I think.
He had to, didn't he? Just smoke anything I can get my hands on. Dip it in turpentine, just ruin my vocal cords, because he was going for the fences. Did you think as well, when he became the Dark Overlord and he had his powers, I didn't think it looked too bad when he had the aura around him. Like every time it changed color or his eyes would do the flashes things. I thought it looked really good. Like I said, the only issue I had was when the Dark Overlord was actually real.
Oh, yeah. Well, when he turned into a monster at the end, like the stuff with Jeffrey Jones specifically, I think the physical effects on him, because they do a lot of work there. You notice every time it feels like the camera cuts back to him, he looks a little bit worse. It's like a slow build. He just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And I think the practical effects there look really good. But the special effects, like you say, the aura, the eyes, all of them remind me of very good movies from that era. And I think the effects totally hold up. When they go full demon at the end of the film, sadly, it feels a little bit closer to Super Mario Brothers. You know, the Bowser scene at the end of the movie, which looks terrible. It has that kind of vibe. Willow in its worst parts. Again, just the special effects weren't there. But funny enough, speaking of Super Mario Brothers, I have to bring this up. I was watching this movie on DVD. It was a really bad omen. And I think I've probably got the highest DVD to gaming ratio in PS5 history. Like, I've hardly played a game on the PS5. I'm using it legitimately as a DVD player, which is absolutely insane.
I haven't turned mine on in 5 months. That's how bad it is.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. But so I'm watching Howard the Duck on DVD, and I'm not sure if people remember, but early DVDs, like VHSs, before you got to the menu, there was like just a standard trailer. So the trailer would just come on at the start, kind of like, going to the movies. And there was one trailer for this film, and it was fucking Super Mario Brothers. I was like, oh my Jesus Christ. That is such a bad omen.
If that's the film they're trying to promote.
Yeah. But if you want to know like how poorly this film was received when it came out in the United States, obviously part of the DVD, there was the option to watch the original trailer. And it must have been the European trailer. And it speaks to your point earlier in the film when you don't actually see Howard the Duck. They changed the name of Howard the Duck to Howard, a New Type of Hero. And if you watch the trailer, they do everything in their power to hide the fact that he's a fucking duck. It was like they decided, it's like, all right, like, and it was an active decision. Like, I'm not just making this up. They were like, listen, we're going to hide the fact that this is a talking duck. We're just going to make this a kind of vague superhero film. So instead of Howard the Duck, it's Howard, a new breed of hero. And in the trailer, you can't make out that it's a duck. And it's the same as we've mentioned it before. If you watch, like, if an international film does well enough to get a mainstream release over here in the cinema and you watch the trailer, nobody talks because they're hiding the fact that there's subtitles or that it's foreign. So they don't want people to know because people won't go and watch those films. And they were trying to do the same thing with this, only the fact that it's a duck. They're like, listen, we won't tell anyone, and people will just show up in the cinema and they'll just kind of find out. It's insane. But yeah, that was the level of panic based on the response in America, which is, so this film did not go down well.
I said about Leah Thompson doing some kind of wonderful. The reaction to the film had a negative effect on the cast, to the point where she did some kind of wonderful. She turned it down originally, but because Howard the Duck bombed so bad, she needed to get onto any other film she could to wash the taste out of people's mouths.
Well, it's weird that she was the only one who really took the hit on this, because obviously Tim Robbins went on to have a very successful. I know, and that is the big issue. That is the issue, is that, whether or not she did, history remembers her as fucking Howard the Duck. And Tim Robbins, as bad as he is, he didn't fuck the duck. Jeffrey Jones, like, again, he's got his own problems, but he went on to have a pretty big career in the 80s, certainly. But yeah, it feels like the person who took the hit for this film was Leah Thompson.
He did a film I remember enjoying, and if I could ever find it, we should cover on this podcast. I only saw it once or twice. Stay Tuned, I think it was called, with John Ritter, where they end up he's like a devil who sells them a sky satellite dish, which ends up being that John Ritter and his wife get sucked into the TV and they go through all different game shows and cartoons and things like that.
That rings a bell.
And and Jeffrey Jones, I think he plays somebody called Spike, who's like a demon trying to get their souls or something like that. But I remember enjoying it. It was a random ride.
Yeah, I'm seeing an image here where he's kind of on TV with like zombie Wayne's World kind of setup and stuff like that. I remember the poster then being sucked into the TV. I remember seeing the VHS, but I've never actually seen the movie. It's actually got pretty decent reviews, 6.2 on IMDb, so it's not bad. And you can watch it on Amazon. You have to pay for it, but the option's there if you feel compelled to watch. Stay tuned.
Do you know what? We might have to cover it. I remember enjoying it as a kid. Whether or not I still... And it was directed by Peter Hyams, mind.
Yeah. Well, I mean, speaking of directors, that was one of the big issues of this movie, I think. God, I mean, we will get around, I guess, the fact that they, instead of having a car for some of the reason towards the end of this film, they end up in a kind of Wright Brothers style flying machine, again, for no reason. I think we can just safely say that the second half of this film, while you can see the money up on screen, it's expensive, it doesn't work, it's terrible. And I think a big issue of this film is that, again, they don't nail the tone down. And whether part of that is studio interference, but I think a big part of that is the direction. And so speaking of directors, is take us back to Howard the Duck, I suppose. Like Willard Huyck, whose name I can never quite guess, and I'm sure I'm not getting it right there. He always seemed like a strange choice for the director of this film. I mean, they initially wanted John Landis, and John Landis is the guy who directed American Werewolf in London, Blues Brothers, and you think, what a perfect combination to end up doing Howard the Duck. He's got the subversive angle from American Werewolf in London. He's got the special effects from that movie as well. In terms of the scale, you've got the Blues Brothers. So instead of getting the guy who directed Trading Places, we got the guy who directed Best Defense, which is a callback to our Eddie Murphy podcast a few weeks ago. Like Eddie Murphy at the start of his career, he had this run of just absolute hits, with the exception of one movie, and it was Best Defense, directed by Willard Huyck. And you're like, why did we end up with this guy? I mean, this guy directed, admittedly, I haven't seen his other films, but we're talking French Postcards and Messiah of Evil. I don't know much about those. Best Defense was a flop. And then somehow he ends up with Howard the Duck. So yeah, it's why? It's a strange choice, to say the least.
Why?
No.
So, married to the writer, Gloria Katz.
Okay, yeah, that's a good start.
But really good friends with George Lucas. Like he did a lot of...
Oh, they did a lot of writing together, of course, didn't they?
A lot of writing together, and they did he was... what was before Star Wars? Lucas did the one... American Graffiti did... he worked on that with Lucas.
Yes, of course.
So it was it was literally... I wouldn't say a vanity project, Howard the Duck, but it was just like, I'll give my friend a shot. Probably.
Well, yeah, I mean, in fairness, it did sound like they initially wanted to get, John Landis feels like an obvious choice for this movie.
Yeah.
And they couldn't get him for one reason or another. Maybe we saw the script, I don't know. And they've ended up with a toy. And it's not a horribly directed film, but it doesn't quite work. And, the action set piece at the end, they look fine. Everything about this film is fine, but it's the fact that they haven't decided on a tone. And maybe a big part of it is the fact that the world wasn't ready for this subversive take on comic books. Again, I think a Howard the Duck remake, something which is potentially on the cards. I think Kevin Smith was working on one for a while. I think Leah Thompson, who's actually, she's a director in her own right now, and she's kind of made peace with this film. She feels like she can make a modern day Howard the Duck. And
I don't think it's suited the film, though. I think this needs to be
it's a TV show,
a long-form TV show. Yeah,
100%. And you think of all the Marvel stuff now, where it's all getting a little bit. I've seen this a million times before. If they go and do a really, again, lean into the subversive elements, make him a private eye, I think it could work. In the MCU, we don't so much have to deal with the fact that, oh, look, it's a talking duck. Like, the universe can deal with it now. They've seen enough weird stuff. A talking duck is the last of their problems. So I think the world's ready for a Howard the Duck. And I think one of the big issues with this movie is that the world wasn't ready for it in 1986. They didn't know, the only real big hits in terms of superhero films had been Superman. That was it. The Richard Donner Superman films were indeed very good, but they were very traditional superhero films, comic book movies.
Yeah.
And then to go basically directly from Superman to the deepest of all cuts in Howard the Duck was actually pretty insane. And the only reason it got made, of course, was because George Lucas was involved.
Yeah. I mean, you look at the back catalogue of Marvel, and I know they tried it in the 70s with Captain America, Doctor Strange, many others that I probably...
Fantastic Four, all kinds of weird shit.
Yeah, they did loads in the 70s, which, okay, that's fine. But they then say, okay, we're going to give her another shot. It's the 80s, technology's improved, audiences are grown. We'll give her another shot with a film from a comic, but we won't go full superhero. So what we'll do is we'll do Howard the Duck. You'll do Howard the what? Howard the Duck. A duck. Yeah, but a duck who wears a suit, wears clothes. Yeah. He knows kung fu. No. He knows quack fu.
Of course.
Okay. So, like, it's so insane. I honestly think the only reason why George Lucas wanted to do this was to show off what Industrial Light and Magic could do. I think literally that's all he wanted. He said, right, we can go away from Star Wars. This is what else we can do. And
well, I think in fairness, he was a fan of the comics. So, I think we are living in a world where nobody was really thinking about making comic book movies. And that was the point. Like, it was easy to get the rights because it was Howard the Duck. And back then, Marvel weren't in the movie making business. But it still seems bizarre. And especially nowadays, in the world we live in, where superheroes for the past, certainly since Marvel changed the game in 2007, but going right back to the early, basically since Blade, really, it's been non-stop superhero films since then. But just the idea that Marvel didn't know what to do with the stuff. Like you said, you mentioned the fact that there was a Captain America movie, that there was a Spiderman movie. This was made for TV drivel. Like, I watched those movies growing up. They were just bad. This is it still seems insane that the first time anyone ever thought, we're going to put some money behind a Marvel project. It wasn't like they put 36 million behind Spider-Man in 1976 and it just didn't work out. No, that didn't exist. Yeah. It was like a 500 grand straight to TV version. So this is the first time they ever put money behind it. And it's like, I don't know, they might as well have made a Squirrel Girl movie. That probably would have made more sense. It's the weirdest thing I think actually about this film is the fact that it exists in 1986. Absolutely.
I don't know why people are complaining either, because you said about 37 million is how much they spent on it. It made 38 million at the box office, so they made their money back. So it's fine.
Yeah, it absolutely didn't make its money back. People forget. Everyone talks about that. It's like, it cost this much to make. Yeah, to make. They probably stuck up a couple of posters, I assume. So yeah, this film did officially bomb. Not as bad as maybe some people would believe. Like you said, it actually made 37 million back. So it made its production cost back, to make the film. But obviously it would have cost a lot more to put it out and everything like that. So the movie certainly did bomb, but it wasn't the biggest bomb of all time. But it has become somewhat infamous. And maybe that's the reason Marvel just disappeared again for another, 13 years, wherever it was.
Until 12 Blade. Years until Blade, yeah. 12 years. I'm sorry, is a perfect comic book adaptation. Blade 1 is spot on.
Blade remains... Oh, sorry, Spiderman. I do apologize.
I'd say in any way, shape, or form, that is a perfect comic book movie.
Yeah, I like. It's one of my top, I would say, 3 cinematic experiences of all time was Blade, because I didn't know much about it, and we were actually going to the cinema to watch. They had re-released The Exorcist at the cinema, and we went to see that. And this is back in the day when you used to just show up at the cinema and hope for the best. And The Exorcist on Saturday night was sold out. So like, oh shit, we got to go and watch something else. And the only other thing on was Blade, and that opening sequence. Like, because there was like a bunch of us, like 5 of us went to see it. And the scene in the nightclub with the music kicking in, and obviously Blade shows up with the sunglasses, the coat. I remember us all looking at each other going, what the fuck? This is the coolest thing I've ever seen. Like, legitimately, because we weren't expecting it. In the same way that The Matrix came out of nowhere. Like, as good as The Matrix was, one of the reasons it was so impactful is because everyone was talking about Star Wars. And then suddenly you went to The Matrix. You're like, wait, how the fuck did this sneak under the radar? Yeah. It felt the same with Blade. Like, I knew it was a thing, but we had no expectations when it came to comic book movies. And then suddenly you get this. Like, it went from 0 to 10 immediately. So yeah, Blade, we really should be doing Blade instead of Howard the Duck.
I was going to ask though, how you managed to get in, right? Because it was an 18, I remember. I got in, but then I realized back then, if you were 15, you were 16 then, in 1998. You would have been 12 foot tall anyway, so they would have just let you in.
I actually wasn't that tall then.
But no, I mean, my brother snuck me in. I managed to. I really enjoyed it in the cinema as well. But I was 15 when I snuck into the cinema to watch it.
Oh, it was such a great
thing as well. The second Marvel adaptation they make, and it's an 18. Like, they are not doing
the traditional route.
18 now. Anymore.
Well, I think back then, and it may be the same with Howard the Duck, is I think maybe they were a bit more kind of like worried, if we put all this money behind something which is going to get a lot of press and they don't get Spider-Man right, it was going to impact comic sales, for instance. Yeah. And obviously DC had done it right twice by this point. which makes it all stranger. Like DC out of the gate, there was a big gap between them, but they're two big, big budget outings. Well, Richard Donner's Superman, and then they go straight into Tim Burton's Batman. Like they absolutely knocked out the park. They were their two biggest hitters and nailed it both times. And Marvel, outside of giving a few quid here and there to like license things out, it's like they're two big swings for the fences were Howard the Duck and Blade. And I don't think that's actually anything to do with Marvel. I think it was just people were like, we're not really, I think most people, for instance, when they went to see both Howard the Duck and Blade, I don't think they knew they were watching a comic book movie. I don't think most people didn't know what Howard the fucking Duck was. And I don't think most people knew who Blade was.
Blade's an action film, isn't it? At the end of
yeah, it's an action film.
But then Howard the Duck is, what is it? What film is it? It's
well, the only thing I could think in terms of, beyond the fact that George Lucas was a fan, and obviously he's got a lot of sway because he's coming off, relatively recently, the Star Wars trilogy. If you look at films which came out a few years before, the most obvious comparison piece, bizarrely, on paper, I think, is Gremlins. You've got kind of puppetry, special effects, and everyone interacting with humans. Obviously, Gremlins was this massive hit. And I think they're like, well, George Lucas, anthropomorphic, duck, they're going to have great special effects because it's coming from Lucasfilm. And they thought, well, yeah, let's give it a bash. Those kind of movies aren't out of place in the mid-'80s. Strange creatures interacting with humans. Like, how many films are there with fucking robots and humans? Like, what's his name? I've got Wally stuck in my head. Mac and Me and all those fucking weird films.
Mac and Me wasn't an alien.
Well, you know what I mean? Like, just straight, well, neither was Gizmo. I'm just saying, like, weird creatures or weird robots interacting with you. It's like, a human and a strange creature or robot kind of interact. The 80s was a wash with those kind of movies. So on paper, it
was
makes
that
sense.
one with, what the fuck's his name from Weird Science?
From Breakfast Club?
Yes. Anthony
Michael
Hall, right? There was a film with him, right, where he was a cop who teamed up with a gnome from deep in the earth. Right? Okay. Yeah. Right. To solve a crime. Like, I think it was called, was it Norm the Gnome?
A gnome named Norm.
A gnome named Norm, yes.
It was also called Upworld.
So Norm's.
It was also. It had. Just to be clear, it had loads of names. If you look at the posters, there's a gnome named Norm. There's Upworld, which I think is what I remember the poster seeing, and there was also Gnome Cop. So
Gnome Cop, yeah. So Norm's magic is stolen, or like something gets stolen. So he ends up in New York, I think it is, and he teams up with Anthony Michael Hall as the rookie, no-nonsense cop to solve the crime.
Fantastic. And again, that was directed by Stan Winston. So I think they were putting a lot of faith in these special effects artists as well. Like, we're going to create something special on screen here. And it's just like an easy, it's basically, your buddy cop movie, your kind of, odd couple. And that's what this is. It's an odd couple. It's, they hint at the fact that obviously Howard the Duck used to be in a band, which again feels pointless in this film because it's just not played up to at all. Like, they don't do anything with that whatsoever.
Well, they kind of do, don't they? Because he does the music on the keyboard and he says it was something I was working on. And then that music he does on the keyboard before they have sex becomes the end song. So
it speaks to the fact that everything's rushed. Yeah. Sorry, mate.
I got to stop pulling all these random films on my ass as well at the moment.
You really are. And the thing is, like, just to be clear, this is Rob's fucking choice. Only one of us is trying to talk about Howard the Duck. You want to talk about any other movie with the exception of Howard the Duck. And honestly, I don't blame you. But you've put me in this position, so we're going to talk about Howard the Duck.
Howard the Duck.
Before we wrap up talking about Howard the Duck, or at least the movie directly, we have to talk about the last song, because this movie gets progressively worse from the lab onwards. The chase sequence, while filmed competently, makes no sense. There's no reason for them to be in a flying car. They don't make enough of an effort to explain why there's a flying car just randomly in the parking lot. It's ludicrous. Yeah. The special effects go off the rails with the demon monster at the end. All sense of kind of motive is lost by this point, and you're like, oh, this really is going off the rails. And then somehow they pull it back from the edge of despair with and you were right, dude, one of the best songs. It's so catchy. All weekend. And I don't know any of the words, so I'm doing that dad thing. I'm Howard, da 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 da.
The only one I know, right? I think it's Howard the Duck. Yeah, he ain't funky, don't feel it, but he shot an arrow straight through my heart. That's all I know.
Well, that's pretty good, and it's more than me. And I do love that sequence. Like Howard's in like full 80s power suit.
Yeah,
Leah Thompson is looking amazing
with shoulder pads. Like, he's even got. And sorry, I know you're talking about the song. Who's making, like, he is going through so many costume changes in this film, right? Mm-hmm. Who is putting a hole in his ass every time for his tail?
I don't know. It does at this point feel like everybody's making custom suits just for Howard the Duck.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's bizarre. But no,
I know we're talking about the song. We'll get to it more in soundtrack. It's a belter. But if we're talking about the end of the film, they had this, they said, nothing can stop the demon except this weird golf cart with a gun attached to it. Yeah. The only way the gun can work is if it's attached to the golf cart. Unless right at the end, when Howard's able to take the gun off, and then all of a sudden it has a fucking sight on it.
Yeah.
Like, what was that about?
Again, well, it's not about anything. It doesn't make any sense. We keep referring to this point in the film, when they go to the lab, everything after that point, things just happen. And I tried to make sense out of them. And there's no sense to be made. They've just got, we've got a list of set pieces we want in this film. And we've not put any of them in the first half of the film because we were interested in character and relationships and motivations. We're abandoning all that now because we've got 45 minutes left and we've got about 18 set pieces. So we are just going to force them in, come hell or high water. And like you say, none of it makes sense. And a big part of it not making any sense is you're suddenly putting Howard into all these quote unquote action set pieces. Yeah. And he doesn't actually have any skills. And the ones he does are so inconsistent. Like the scene in the restaurant, which we haven't even mentioned, when Jeffrey Jones's character goes full monster. Yeah. The humans go out of the blue. There's mob violence out of nowhere. They're going to kill Howard. There's a sentient duck from outer space. And their first reaction for every single person, including the little old ladies, the black, everyone's just like, kill it with fire.
What, we want to eat it. Like, why? Why are you trying to kill and eat something that's talking to you?
Exactly. And the duck is talking and he's pleading. And in the background, there's a demon with like glowing eyes and nobody gives a shit. But again, they're just like, we need to get onto the next sequence. Oh, it's a flying car sequence. Why has he got a flying car? Don't worry about it. Keep moving. Okay, well, there's a demon now. How are we going to deal with this? Well, there's a golf cart with a laser on it. Why? Don't ask any questions. Well, what's Howard going to do? He's going to lift it onto his shoulder and he's going to shoot the monster. But I thought it needed to be attached to the golf cart. Yeah, don't worry about that. We want to keep this under 2 hours. So they just keep doing things. And then, of course, like I said, they save things by having, it's so, I'm won over so easy. I'm like, God, this film is shit. But this musical number at the end is fucking dope. It's dope.
Can you imagine selling this to Leah Thompson as well? Like you did, like you were amazing in Back to the Future. We've got something for you, right? So basically what we want you to do, we want you to be a damsel in distress. You will get a kick-ass song at the end of it. You know, you're going to be able to play music. It's going to be great, but we want you to be a damsel in distress. Okay, who's the hero? It's a duck. What? No, it's a duck. You're the damsel in distress to a duck. Oh, and also you want to fuck the duck. I'm going back to that. Okay, yeah, no, I'm signed. Where do I sign?
Where does one sign? And she was fully committed to this film.
Yeah, it is. What I loved about the end sequence as well, the song, was their instrument changes. Mm-hmm. Like she's got the cool guitar, you've got a keytar. I don't know what 80s synth drum thing that woman was playing at the end.
Doesn't matter.
Right. It looked like she was just, there was things attached to strings and she's just hitting bin lids at that point.
Yeah, it really did look quite dodgy.
And then the other woman had another guitar, maybe a bass, I couldn't really tell, with a weird rail going from the neck to the body. Did you notice that?
Yes, I did. So that, again, very strange.
Yeah, but they also managed to have a duck-sized guitar, just in case he goes on screen.
Just in case. Well, the weirdest thing with this, and we will just deal with the soundtrack and the score now because we've talked about it so much, is that outside of the score, that was John Barry. So we mentioned it earlier. You know, he was the guy who did the James Bond stuff, and I think the score for this film, again, nothing to complain about. You know, he really does. I quite enjoyed the fact that when they walked into the lab, that it briefly goes full James Bond. And this is a guy who also did Zulu, Midnight Cowboy. He did the '76 version of King Kong, which feels like an obvious fit. Excuse me. So this guy's got an amazing track record, and I think the score is actually very good. But what people remember is the soundtrack. And it was actually put together by Thomas Dolby. I'm not sure if you know who Thomas Dolby is, but he did one of my favorite 80 songs of all time, She Blinded Me with Science. If you've not heard that song before, go download it. Oh, it's an absolute belter. And it shows up of all places in Metal Gear Solid 5. It's one of the tapes you can collect. But he actually picked the band members. He wrote the songs individually. So every choice made, as bizarre as they are, were very deliberately chosen by Thomas Dolby. Thomas Dolby is actually in the film. He works in the bar. He works in the bar where Cherry Bomb are playing at the start. But yeah, I actually, as bonkers as everything is, it was all chosen very deliberately in that very 80s kind of way. And there's a clear callback to Back to the Future. I mean, when Howard the Duck starts playing the guitar, it's very much Marty McFly at the end of Back to the Future, is it not?
Yep.
Yeah, it really is, which I thought was a cool little callback. But, Leah Thompson, she learned how to play the guitar. She did all her own songs. She took singing lessons. She was fully committed. And despite what you said, I suspect that she wasn't sold on the idea of being a damsel distress, which is only what it becomes in the second half. The first half, as I said, it's a character piece. They're like, you're going to be playing alongside an anthropomorphic duck. And it's like, we're going to make a genuine relationship out of this. And I'm sure that's what she was being sold on.
Did you say relationship?
Relationship, it did sound like that. Yeah. But, and again, you've got to remember, 1986, if George Lucas comes knocking with a big budget, it's a tough gig to turn down. And one of the more bizarre things, and I have to ask this of you, did you know that it was directed by Willard Huyck? Because growing up, I think this was another kind of The Nightmare Before Christmas situation. Because if you look at the poster, there's no mention of him. It's George Lucas Presents. Yeah. And I just assumed George Lucas directed this.
Yeah, it's Quentin Tarantino all over as well. Quentin Tarantino Presents. You get it in so many films, you think it's a Quentin Tarantino film, and then you realize, oh, no, they're just using his name. It was sold on the back of George Lucas. Willard Huyck.
We'll never get his name right.
No. Honestly, it sounds like a noise Goofy makes, doesn't it?
It really does.
But yeah, so no, I wouldn't have. I always thought it was George Lucas. And you think he went from Star Wars to this? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's quite bizarre, and he actually had a lot riding on this because this was at the start of Lucasfilm. I think they just bought was it Lucas Ranch or Skywalker Ranch?
Skywalker Ranch, yeah.
Yeah. So he was putting a lot of money into that, and a big part of that was he was like he needed Howard the Duck to hit big to actually be able to afford it, and obviously the film absolutely sank. So one of the bizarre positive things to come out of Howard the Duck is that to ensure that he could still pay for it and still stay afloat, he had to sell off the CGI animation division of Lucasfilm to the CEO of Apple, who stepped in and was willing to pay a decent price, and that actually led to the creation of Pixar. So, no Howard the Duck, there's no Woody and Buzz. So, it's one of those strange things, but one of the bizarre positives to come out of the creation of Howard the Duck, the movie, is the creation of Pixar and the subsequent creation of Toy Story. So I thought that was a bizarre one. But yeah, if you can't take any positives out of the film, there's one for you. Yeah. Everybody loves Pixar.
Without Howard the Duck, Pixar wouldn't have existed. I'm good with that.
Exactly. So yeah, we're gonna have to wrap that up in terms of talking about the film, because it is absolutely insane. But in terms of love and hate, I'll just rattle through mine quickly for love. Special effects, with the exception of the demon monster at the end, which is rough, I think the special effects mostly hold up pretty well. 2, and really this should be number 1, is Leah Thompson. I think she's actually really good in this film, and a big part of that is just I always had a massive crush on Leah Thompson in the 80s. And of course, number 3, the final song. It's an absolute belter. So if nothing else, listen to 2 things. Listen to the final song from this movie, and listen to Blinded Me with Science by Thomas Dolby. Both classic.
While you're at it as well, the theme song for Princess Bride, but just
Jesus Christ, why did you have to ruin it? You've already got me watching this bullshit film, and now you're trying to ruin one of my favorite movies of all time with that horrible song.
Star Wars.
Jesus Christ.
So for me, Leah Thompson, obviously, and the song, I'm agreeing with you on both of those. I've said it in so many episodes as well, that I cannot get that song out of my head. I only ever watched this film once, but I still have the Howard the Duck song in my head. I love it.
It's a catchy tune. It's got a really strong hook. Like I said, I couldn't remember the words, but you just immediately start humming. So yeah. Beware, it will get caught. It's a real earworm.
at the time of this recording, I haven't done it, but when I edit, when people listen to this, they would have already heard the tune because it's going to be our intro music.
Oh, fantastic! I think it should be carpet bombed all the way through this podcast. Just
every now and then, just put,
yeah.
I might put the full in case we get sued. Maybe not, but for a longer version at the end of the.
I think maybe we get. Like, let's be honest. How many people are listening to this podcast? I think we could get away with at the end of this podcast. Just have the entire song. I think we'll be absolutely fine. So, like, if you're listening to this podcast, stay tuned till the very end. The whole song will be on there. As I'm saying this, I appreciate that I'm giving Rob work to do. But it'll be awesome. Yeah. We'll see how it works out.
Maybe 15 seconds of it, but go ahead and download it because you'll love it. Anyway, so they're the two, and I must admit, I liked Jeffrey Jones's performance of the Dark Overlord. He was scarier than when it became CGI massive monster.
Oh, much better, much better. It was a shame they changed to CGI massive monster because he, like you said, I like the performance, but the special effects are really, really good.
Yeah.
And then they go and ruin it with that CGI. Again, and I have to think it was a studio decision.
We've already said it as well. Clarification, I am separating the role from the man. Like,
That's absolutely
separating the role from the man on that one because
he's a shit house, but he's great in this film. It's absolutely fine. Yeah. The two aren't mutually exclusive.
What's your hate?
I mean, the big issue, and I've mentioned it a whole bunch of times, the tonal shift in the second half. For all the faults in the first half of this film, I legitimately enjoyed watching the first 45 minutes of the film, 100%. The second half is an absolute mess. It's a mess of poorly conceived set pieces. The special effects got the rails. There's still good stuff. Like you say, Jeffrey Jones in particular, he kind of almost saves the second half of the movie with his performance. But for the most part, it's the tonal inconsistencies and the tonal shift in the second half. The writing, I don't think it is just good enough. I think for Howard the Duck to work, I think the writing has to be really on point, especially his dialogue.
Yeah.
There's some really rough lines in this. I'm sure, like, what is it? It's like his final line when he's fighting the Dark Overlord is, "Prepare to eat beak." That doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any fucking sense. It's terrible writing. And that's supposed to be his equivalent of, like, you think of like Aliens, like, "Get away from her, you bitch." Yeah. It's like totally cool line. He gets prepared to eat. Yeah, it makes no sense.
Kids on the playground shouting "prepare to eat beak" it kind of feels like something completely different at that point.
It does. It doesn't work. And the fact that it kind of, at least briefly, killed Leah Thompson's career, which was a bit of a shame because, I think she could have been one of the biggest actresses of the late 80s going into the early 90s. But it kind of derailed things. There's no two ways about it.
Not sure what Tim Robbins was doing. That's one of my hates. Like, I honestly don't know what the hell was going on with Tim Robbins. Also, to the point as well, that they had to have some sort of science, and this goes to the writing, they had to have some sort of science character in there. So the link to him is he's briefly, and it's so quickly mentioned that he's dating the drummer.
Yes.
But there's no interaction between him and the drummer at all then after that?
No, there's not. It's just kind of an excuse for him to be in the changing rooms and for him to be, and it not to be weird. There are one or two lines which, if you don't catch the fact that he's dating the drummer, are really quite bizarre. Like, he just delivers them out of nowhere. So again, it doesn't really work. Yeah, Tim Robbins, I don't particularly like his performance in this film. No. I guess he's needed because they go to the lab in the second half. But yeah, it feels like it's from a different film. That's for sure.
Paul, I want to say his name right. Paul Guilfoyle, who was like in CSI for like 900 years.
Yeah.
His character was so stupid. Again, going back to the writing, why he's trying to hunt Howard the Duck, who hasn't done anything wrong, but nobody's trying to hunt him in the first half of the film. Like, that whole character, it was all put on the character, Lieutenant Walker, that we need to catch this duck for some unknown reason. It was the weirdest thing.
Yeah.
And finally, the diner scene was absolutely so strange. They all wanted to kill and murder this talking duck, who 30 seconds before they thought was a kid in a costume.
Yeah.
So they're trying to kill a kid in a costume?
Apparently so. While a demon with glowing eyes just sits there, nobody paying attention to that whatsoever.
It was just a mess, that scene. I wasn't a huge fan of it.
It's weird because I totally agree with you, but at the same time, it had some cool special effects. Like the scene itself, like some of the dialogue in that sequence is actually kind of fun. The interactions between Leah Thompson, Howard, and Jeffrey Jones are actually quite fun. But it completely goes off the rails when they decide they're going to kill a kid in a costume. It's bonkers, yeah.
That's my 3.
Okay, well, the next one up is facts. I think I've actually used all the facts I had written down during our kind of standard conversation. So do you have anything you wanted to add, or?
Yeah, I got a few. But before I move on, if anyone's actually playing Hey You Guys Bingo, I am pretty sure Lee, who the fuck's Lee? Liam did watch this with his wife. I know he hasn't mentioned her today, so I just need to...
I did watch it with my wife. Yeah, she got particularly upset about the whole duck pun thing. We'd like to give her a point. The fact that it was called Duck World, the fact that, you know, there was like a Bloomingdale's card, but it was like Quackington Dales. Like everything was just like, but like you said, it doesn't add up. It's not like human Dales, or like I said earlier, human world. It just doesn't add up. So I don't think she ever quite got over that, but she actually felt very similar about the film to the way I did. Like, you know, she hated Super Mario Brothers in the same way, but this film, she agrees it's a bad film, in case you're interested in my wife's opinion, but it's an interesting failure. So yeah, we'll get to that later.
There you go. You got a full house of Hey You Guys Bingo now. So
yeah, you did mention the fact that I was tall already, didn't you?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're all good.
How you managed to get into Blade at 15 was my question.
Of course. Yeah.
So Leah Thompson confirmed she still has the Les Paul guitar, Cherry Bomb, and sometimes still plays with it. So that's cool. Awesome. She walks away with that because Les Paul is a decent make. This one, I thought, this isn't about the film. This is following a test screening. Universal executives Sid Sheinberg and Frank Price were arguing about who was to blame for green lighting the film, to the point that it ended up in a fist fight.
Brilliant. That's how bad this film is.
You greenlit Howard the Duck. No, you greenlit Howard the Duck. You say that again, I'm going to fucking knock you out. Bring it on! Bring it on!
Nobody wants that on their CV. I mean, it's probably worth fighting over. It could mean the difference between getting, you know, a movie deal or whatever. It's like, dude, I did not greenlight goddamn Howard the Duck. Nobody wants to be the guy who greenlit Howard the Duck. Nobody wants to be the guy who gave away the toy rights at Star Wars. You just don't want to be that dude. Like, who's the guy who like if you ask anyone, who's the guy who greenlit Cutthroat Island? Nobody knows because he doesn't work anymore. Either that or he was killed on the spot. Who knows? But yeah.
Cutthroat Island. Jesus Christ. Where was I? Leah Thompson had to have her hair styled for 2 hours each day.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, for it to look like in fairness, it is the most 80s haircut of all time. Yeah. And there are sequences where, as ridiculous as the hair looks, it does look like a lot of work has gone into it. Yeah. Like it does look like 2 hours worth of work to make it look like the most 80s haircut of all time.
So the Dark Overlord is based on the Marvel villain who originally brought Howard to Earth. So Howard was brought to Earth by the Overlord, not the weird telescope thing that they did in the film. His full title in the comics, I need to take a breath, is Thog, the Netherspawn, Overmaster of Somnus.
Fantastic.
No wonder they changed it to Dark Overlord.
Yeah. I'm just the Dark Overlord. That'll do. That's enough.
What else have I got here? I got quite a few, but yeah, you've already said Cyndi Lauper and Madonna. Due to the movie's disastrous box office performance domestically, the title was changed to Howard and the Breed of Hero. Sorry, you've done that one. Tori Amos auditioned for the role of Beverly Switzer. John Cusack and Martin Short auditioned for the voice of Howard. That's two separate voices.
Yeah. Well, they've obviously, you talk about like buddies getting the role. And don't get me wrong, I actually think Howard was fine. But, the fact that Admiral Akbar got the role suggests that maybe George Lucas had something to do with that,
But also made Howard sound, like I said, a 50-year-old man. He's 27, apparently.
I'm not sure if either of those are really helping in 1986, John Cusack and Martin Short. It's like neither of those guys are 50 in 1986. And I think Martin Short might have pulled it off.
Howard the Duck's meant to be 27.
Oh, yeah, of course. Oh, in that case, of course. Sorry, I've got it mixed up. It really should have been John Cusack.
Yeah, it should have been John Cusack.
But then that could be my answer to like
neuroticism from, the one where he holds up the bloody...
Say Anything.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
All I had to do was this, and you knew where I was on about.
Yeah.
You can't see what I'm doing. I'm holding my hands above my head.
He's pretending to hold an 80s style ghetto blaster above his head, wearing a very long, very grey trench coat. If you want a reference to it, a bizarre reference, the Minions posters, The Rise of Gru, that are everywhere. The Minions are holding a ghetto blaster above their head on the posters on the side of buses. And I'm like, how many kids are getting this reference to 1984's Say Anything? And I'm not sure if Say Anything was released in 1984, but it was around then anyway. But
finally, just because it's random, Jay Leno was up for the role of Phil.
Oh my God.
Jay Leno.
That is a bizarre one, I'll give you that. Yeah. Say Anything was 1989. I do apologize. I was miles off.
Just a little bit, fucking hell.
Yeah.
End of the year.
Oh, well. Yeah. Jesus Christ.
I'm done with facts.
Yeah, Legacy, we kind of already covered everything. You know, the fact that, well, there were no more Marvel movies for 13 years after this. We mentioned the fact that, you know, Howard the Duck has come back to popular consciousness to a certain extent because of, all the cameos he's had recently, albeit brief ones. I feel like the world is ready for Howard the Duck now because, you know, people are more aware of the movie from 1986 because of what's happened subsequently. It's like, you know, if he gets a kind of mid-credit sting at the end of Guardians of the Galaxy and suddenly you see a talking duck, of course, people go online and they're like, who the hell was that in the mid-credit sting? So people, you know, kids much younger than us, obviously. I say kids much younger than us, like we're kids, very much full, you know, I'm 40 years old now. But I feel like, you know, people are aware of Howard the Duck now. So as I said, you know, it did kill the Marvel movie for a long time, but I think the world's ready for, you know, a return to Howard the Duck. And I hope Leah Thompson gets a chance to direct it because, as I said, you know, she's worked on quite a bit now. And to be honest, I know you're a fan of shit like Moon Knight, but I would take a Howard the Duck fucking TV show over the likes of Moon Knight and Miss Marvel any day of the week. At least it's interesting and a bit different.
I definitely want to watch Howard the Duck. And the problem I have is Moon Knight, the TV show, which was good, wasn't Moon Knight as I know him.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I didn't have a clue. I just thought it was absolutely fine, but a little bit like I kind of feel like I've seen.
I always appreciate the out of the box thinking. Let's swing for the fences. I love, as you've already said, I love a near miss. Something that is trying something else. Do you know what I mean?
Well, that's why I love the first half of this film because it is trying something.
And God bless them. They tried for something with this movie.
They certainly did. But yeah, I think we've covered everything else with Legacy. We've already covered soundtrack and score. So the only thing really left is video games. So there was an initial release for the ZX Spectrum, the Commodore 64, the Apple II, all the ones we remember from W.H. Smith's, which we remembered, you know, mentioned a million times, the giant boxes. It's a terrible game for a terrible movie. Howard the Duck looks about 6'2" in it. The sound, if you get a chance to watch the Commodore 64 long play, you absolutely should, just to hear the noise he makes when he travels through water. It's like something from your nightmares. It's unbelievable. But in terms of what I'd like...
Before you move on to what you want from a video game, can I read the synopsis to you for the...
Absolutely.
It's insane. So Howard the Duck has to save his best friends, Phil and Beverly. After being parachuted to Volcano Island, Howard needs to find a backpack to proceed with the search. The game consists then of 4 levels, in the last of which Howard, armed with a neutron gun, will finally face Overlord. Like, why is he on Volcano Island?
Why not, I guess? You know, the limitations of mid-80s video games, I suppose. And that is one of the things, if you're playing the video game, other than the fact that there's a giant duck, and it really does look like a man-sized duck rather than a kid-sized duck, it's just an adventure game, like nothing else, except for it looks like they've literally just taken a video game about some dude adventuring on a volcano, and they've just plonked a duck head on him.
Yeah.
That is it. Yeah. So, yeah, it looks pretty rough. And indeed it was. So, yeah, don't go... I don't know how... You'd have the, you know, unless you've got a Commodore 64 sitting around. I mean, I've got a Commodore 64 Mini, but sadly it doesn't have Howard the Duck on there. So, yeah, you'd have to get the initial tape, which I'm sure sounds absolutely insane to kids nowadays. Yeah. We used to play video games on tapes.
On cassette tapes, yeah.
Cassette tapes, absolutely bonkers.
But I'm going to make it easy for you. I haven't got a clue what I want to see in a game.
Well, bizarrely, the first choice, like the obvious choice for me, felt like... what is it? Eidos Montreal's, who did Montreal. Why did I say that in such a weird way? Eidos Montreal, who did the Guardians of the Galaxy video game. Because it's got a good combination of writing and action. But then I thought, well, the action isn't really the point of Howard the Duck. So I was like, okay, I need a game where I'm still getting the same production values, but the writing's better. Well, no, the writing in that game was fantastic in fairness. So the writing remains very good, but there's more of an option. So I want to be able to talk my way out of situations or to hide or whatever, or to take the action route. And bizarrely, I came back to Eidos Montreal again, who did Deus Ex Human Revolution. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of Deus Ex games, but the whole point of that game is, yes, there is action, but you don't have to kind of go the action route. You can sneak around, you can use dialogue options. So I thought that would be my kind of, you know, Howard the Duck video game. But make no mistake, it's going to be Howard the Duck based on the comic books, or Howard the Duck based on his place in the MCEU, not Howard the Duck, the 1986 movie. Although I like the idea of just randomly having like a Guitar Hero section at the end of the video game. So yeah.
I was in my head. I was going to go, right, all I want is a downloaded a DLC of Guitar Hero where you just play Howard the Duck.
I mean, that's probably the best version. Yeah. Forget my Eidos Montreal version of Deus Ex Human Revolution starring Howard the Duck. Let's just go with a DLC track for Guitar Hero 3, which has Howard the Duck instead. Yeah. That'd be much more fun. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this week. So I guess this one's going to be an interesting one. What would you rate it, and would you encourage others to see it? I guess you have encouraged others to see it by doing it on this goddamn podcast.
I would encourage others to see it. You have to see the near misses, the randomness, what the fuck is going on-ness of this film. You know what I mean? But the score, it's a bit different because I still had a good time with this film, I will admit. So it's a 3 because it's not good at all. But for me, having a good time with it, it's a 3.
That's fair enough. I mean, I wouldn't suggest anyone watch this film, to be honest. I think there's an argument to be made that it's a bizarre film, like you said, and it has a unique place in history, given its place as the first big budget live action Marvel film, and of course, with the whole Howard Duck coming back to prominence because of the MCU. But even then, I don't think I would feel confident telling anyone to watch this film, because other than you, if you hadn't seen it, I'd be like, yeah, go and watch this. But, my kind of average, when you're just a random friend, it's like, oh, should I watch Howard the Duck? It's like, no, you fucking shouldn't.
To your point, you put the teaser of this on, which was just a picture of Play-Doh. And one of our friends said, I bet this is a Rob choice.
Of course it's a Rob choice. Of course it's a Rob choice. I mean, that goes without saying. Yeah. So yeah, in terms of a score, I wouldn't recommend it to others, and a score is 2. Now, 2 is probably being quite kind, because this film is bad, but like yourself, I enjoyed watching it, and it feels like I'm kind of like faint praise on, like there's a 3-star movie in here, but there is. And as I said, most of it, I would say maybe the first 45 minutes, it's like this borderline is a 3-star film. But yeah, the second half sadly is a 1-star film, so we're going to settle at 2, and I'm not going to recommend it to anyone. So not great, but like I said, I agree. I enjoyed watching it. Yeah, but it's not good. It's not good.
Right, so I guess all that's left for us to do today on such a beautiful day, looking forward to getting out there, is ask you what we're doing next week.
Well, after Howard the Duck, it felt like we had to kind of go back and do a classic, something where we can guarantee, all right, this is a good movie. We can't just keep doing stinkers and kind of curios the whole time. Otherwise, we really will have no listeners. So yeah, next week we're doing
Phantom.
What's that? The Phantom. Imagine if we went straight from Howard the Duck to the Phantom starring Billy Zane. That would be absolutely bananas, wouldn't it? I mean, maybe one day we will do the Phantom, because that is legitimately a film I wouldn't mind rewatching.
What about Gnome Cop? Are we doing Gnome Cop?
Oh, Jesus Christ. We'll get there eventually. See, this is Rob goes down this rabbit hole of all these batshit movies only he's seen. So, yeah, we're not doing any of those movies next week. We're going for a much safer bet. And it's amazing that it's taken us until episode 71 to actually cover it. But we're going to do Jurassic Park. I don't need to say what year it is. I don't need to say who it's by. We all bloody know. And obviously, the latest film is in the cinema at the moment. And despite dodgy reviews, it's done massive numbers. But, yeah, this was one of the biggest movies of my childhood, one of the biggest movies of all time. So yes, we're in much safer hands next week.
And speaking of belter, an absolute belter of soundtrack.
Oh yeah. The sound, everything about this movie. Spoiler alert.
Sorry.
Everything about this film is fantastic. It's like, I don't think it's any surprise to be like, would you recommend someone to watch Jurassic Park? Yes. Is it a 5-star movie? Yes. So yeah, you don't actually have to listen to next week's.
I mean, it's a good film. Whether it's 5 stars or not, we'll get to it.
Well, Jesus Christ, here we go. A classic Rob curveball. As if Howard the Duck wasn't enough of a curveball. He's going to tell us all that Jurassic Park's a 2-star movie next week. So that's something to look forward to.
Howard, it's a 3-star film as well. My rating system is completely off the scale. Like, it's so fucking, it changes week to week.
Well, really will be. And that's the thing, you put yourself under so much pressure now, because imagine if you do give Jurassic Park a 3 stars and you're putting it alongside Howard Duck in the pantheon of movie making. So yeah, if nothing else, stay tuned for what Rob has to say about Jurassic Park next week. But as always, thank you for joining us. Thank you for sticking with this absolutely batshit podcast. I appreciate we've jumped around a bit, but that is the nature of Howard the Duck, the movie. Yeah, normal service will resume next week with Jurassic Park. So yeah, thanks for listening, and please do join us next week. Bye-bye.
What is it when it's Rob's choice? It's not normal service.
There's nothing normal about Howard the Duck, dude. Nothing at all.
Cheers, guys. Bye now.
Oh, and before we forget, here is Rob with all the finer details. Got to get through those, dude.
Yeah, so basically you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Hey You Guys 80s. We're also on email at heyyouguys80s@gmail.com. Please feel free to drop us any recommendations, any corrections or omissions we may have missed from any of the films that we've covered. Just get them in. And also, if you could, please leave us some 5-star reviews. That would really help us. And we'd like to thank, as always, Darry Fletcher at Darry Doodles for the fantastic artwork that we're now producing.
Cheers, Darry.
Thanks again for listening, and we will see you next week.
Cheers. Bye.